Brothers and sisters, I'm meditating on today about the whole path towards union with God. Call it what you will, whether it's the call to the heights, the path of ascent. We speak about in the mystical traditions of the church, the whole idea of the ascent towards God, the climb towards God. Pier Giorgio Frassati, blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati, the great Dominican, would always say, verso alto, towards the heights. And the way about reaching God, the way about being drawn by God towards these heights is by a paradox. In other words, it's not what it first seems. St. Thomas Aquinas says in his great work in the Summa that a lot of confusion happens for people in the spiritual life when they start to judge divine things by sensible things. In other words, like sometimes we have the wrong order in our minds based just on our purely sensible experience or what we might project onto how really to find divine union. And this is perhaps a little clearer when we look at Christ and his words. Christ says that if you want to follow me, and where is Christ going? He's going to the Father, he's going to heaven, he's going to the ultimate fulfillment of humanity. But he says, pick up your cross and follow me. Or he says in other places, if you want to be exalted, be humbled. Because if you exalt yourself, the opposite will happen. So it's like a paradox. Like if you want to reach the heights of God, you have to go down, basically. So this is the great, tradition of the church, like St. John of the Cross, who was one of the big preeminent teachers. And funny enough, in the last while, I've found a lot of Protestants being attracted to him because they realize that from their own experience, maybe in some of their spiritualities, they realize that it may not be as gospel true as this paradox, as the idea of the cross first, the idea of really getting to terms with the suffering that is necessary as part of this life to prepare us for being raised high with God. And so St. John of the Cross often can be a great light because one of the dangers I think today in our spirituality is to avoid the cross, or to try and reach God without the way that God has traveled for us, which is by picking up the cross and as he said, follow me. What he means by picking up the cross, I suppose we could see this in two ways. First of all, literally the active part of clinging to the cross, in other words, to the suffering, so the mortifications, the self-denials that we might take on us to kind of purify our heart from creaturely things, so therefore to direct it more towards God. As well as then the other one is that the way that just sufferings just come in our life, that we have no choice over it, it afflicts us. Just like how Simon of Cyrene is walking and the cross comes to him. In that moment, it's not only the biggest inconvenience, but it's probably, he's faced with this terrible horror and the suffering of this innocent man. And that must have such an impact on him. But it's only afterwards could he realize what a blessing it was for that cross to come to him. There's this thing that it seems so horrible and has been used for evil in so many places is now becoming the very source by which light will explode in the world in a new way, and salvation and grace will come. And so in the moment, it's a terrible thing. But afterwards, he realizes, what a blessing. I got to carry the cross with Jesus. And so, okay, so come back to this theme about descent. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean to go down with the Lord? What does it mean to travel downwards? And like I said, this is the path that Christ traces, is the very way. The more down we go, the more up we go. So it's a paradox. And what he means is that I think to understand that it's just the very humbling experience of suffering. Whether, like I said, is that we, take on forms of asceticism, and that could be just putting aside prayer, killing those false desires for a lot of million other things where we could just step back and pray. or maybe that we won't take that extra piece of meat at meal, or we won't, we want a bit of salt on the food, but we'll give it up. Just small things that we start to discipline our desires and say, no, we're raising them to something greater. We're redirecting our heart towards God. And while kind of a unpopular way is like, yeah, like the way to find true happiness is have everything you want, do everything you want, and avoid all suffering at all costs, and you're gonna be happy. No, 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 no. The opposite will happen, because when you seek these unbridled pleasures of the world, you end up empty. And I think we all have that experience, that we would end up just empty if we gave in totally to our pleasures. But if we were to travel downwards with the Lord in embracing the suffering of self-denial, of offering things up, we're surprised by joy. We're surprised by a freedom of heart.